everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Saoirse, and in today's video I'm going to be talking all about the books that I read in the month of May, giving you my rating, what I thought of them. On this channel I talk a lot about knitting as well as books, and I also do vlogs where I kind of talk about what I'm reading, what I'm knitting on, and my writing journey. So if any of that is something that interests you, make sure to hit that subscribe button before you go, and let's go ahead and get into the stats for the month of May. I am a little late on this video. I've been busy. I feel like I kept pushing back this video, being like, oh yeah, I'll do it later, and then never remembering to actually do it. So here we are, finally. So anyways, let's go ahead and get into the stats. So in the month of May, I read 8 books. I DNF'd one of my books that was on my TBR for the month of May. 5 of the books that I read were ebooks, 2 were physical copies that I own, and 1 was an audiobook. 4 of them were Kindle Unlimited books, 2 of them were from the library, and I had 0 rereads this month. 6 of the books I read were on my monthly TBR for May, and then 2 of them were not. 8 of them, all 8, were part of a series. 0 were obviously standalones. 3 of them were authors that I had read before, and 4 of the authors were new to me in the month of May. So technically I did not accomplish my May TBR because I did not finish one of the books, but I chose to DNF it. I would have finished it if I had enjoyed it, so kind of like, I don't know, I feel like I did pretty well with my May TBR, and my average rating this month was 3 stars. And my rating mood this month, kind of the general vibe I was in when I was rating books, was just kind of, for me, like my level of normal, my normal level of critical. Like, I don't think I was super harsh, don't think I was super, like, you know, because sometimes I'm in the mood where I'm like, if I enjoyed it, 5 stars. Other times I'm like, you know, it had some issues, I'm gonna be a little bit more critical. But I feel like this month it was kind of just normal Saoirse level of critique, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's get into the reviews. So the first book that I read in the month of May was probably my most highly anticipated release of 2024. I don't have many, like that list is very few. It was literally this book and Hove-Ass. Anyways, so it's Reckless Stars by Caroline Peckham and Susan Valenti, and they are the authors of the Zodiac Academy series. This is the 9th book, 9th and final book of Zodiac Academy. And I think it's interesting that this book, again, one of my highly anticipated reads of 2024, also followed a similar path as Hove-Ass, where it was super highly anticipated and very much underwhelming and disappointing. So not only was it one of my most highly anticipated books this year, it's also one of my most disappointing reads this year. So I'm not going to talk about Zodiac Academy too much in terms of a synopsis. If you want to look up what it is, go for it. I overall do still really like this series, and the characters are some of my absolute favorite romantasy characters, and I love the world that they built for Zodiac Academy, and I love, like, some of these romances in the series are some of my most favorite ever. But unfortunately this last book was, it just, in my opinion, just wasn't well done. I know that people generally don't really view Zodiac Academy as like a well-written series. Like, I feel like I see often people kind of critiquing the writing as like not being very good, and I personally didn't mind the writing style. Is it the next great American novel? No, but you know, it's not supposed to be. But this book, the writing, it wasn't the writing style so much as it was just like the content. It was way too long. Basically, that's what I'm trying to get at. The book was just way too long. It included way too many unnecessary scenes, unnecessary POVs. It was just so long. Like, and the 8th book was also way too long. It just kept dragging, and I really got the sense that the authors just didn't really know how to end this series. So it kind of ended up just being a very long slog to get through. I felt like nothing really happened, like, and some of the plot points, like, they weren't satisfying because, like, you didn't know how they played into the overall, like how is this thing that they're doing in this scene supposed to help them win against the big bad, you know, like, where's the progress here, where's the payoff? Like, there just wasn't any throughout the whole book until the very end, and then that part is so dragged out and long and unnecessary, and it was just like at that point, like, I just didn't care anymore. I think to summarize my feelings on this book, it was like I was expecting to have all the feels while reading this book, right? It's one of my favorite series, it's the end, like, you'd think that I would be crying, that I would have moments of like kicking my feet and giggling, and moments of like, oh my gosh, like, I have to put the book down to like digest what just happened. It literally had none of those reactions. The only thing I felt while reading this book was just relief when it ended, and that's not the way you want to feel about the final book in a series that you love. I don't really know what happened with this last book. It was getting off the rails already, I feel like, in book 7, and I think that this series should probably have only been 6 or 7 books. It shouldn't have been dragged out any more than that. They should have found a way to wrap it up earlier, but I was, you know, still hoping for a good time with this book, but I don't know, there were some cute moments, there were some fun moments, but overall it just didn't have, I didn't have any of the same, you know, like, the reasons why I loved reading Zodiac Academy, like, I didn't have those same reactions during this last book. So I don't know, I was very disappointed in this book, and I'm not sure why they dragged out the series the way they did. But overall, I would still say, like, if someone would be like, should I still read it? I'm like, you know, yes, because I got to read about some of the characters that I love so much, like Orion. I love Tori and Darcy. I love Darius. The rest of the Zodiac boys, the, you know, Seth, Caleb, Max, like, I love those characters so much. So I would still recommend the series, but just know that it kind of falls apart at the end, in my opinion. I'm gonna move on. So that was a 3-star read. And then the next book that I read was my only 5 stars of the month. And it was Wicked Souls by Katie Wismer. This is the second book in the Marionettes series. I remember, so this series, it's like a, I guess I would classify it as like an urban fantasy romantasy book series. It's basically like our main character in the first book, Valerie. She is attending an academy where they are training her to become part of the Marionettes, which is this like secret society type situation. They serve the vampires that are like in charge. So it's like set in a world where vampires are in charge of like these, like New York City, for example, is like in a spot, in a location where it's in charge, or the vampires are in charge of it. So vampires like rule like sections of the world. So there's like a United States section, I don't know, I forget what they're called in the books, like realm, I don't know, whatever terminology they use, but there's also like a Russian vampire section that's in charge of, you know, there in China and all the other, you know, all these different locations around the world where vampires are in charge. And it's not always super clear like what's happening outside their areas of ruling, like the areas they rule and then the outside areas, I'm not really sure. I think it's something that continues to be answered throughout the series, like what's going on in that part of the world. At the start of the first book, Valerie is having issues with her magic. She's a blood witch and she is like not at her full strength, and she's kind of like, what the heck is going on? And trials, basically the initiation into the Marionettes is starting and her magic is acting up. So she's like, okay, great, that's gonna be fun to deal with. And then there's, on top of that, so many other crazy things happening in her world that she's trying to figure out. So I'm not doing a very good job of explaining it, but it is in my opinion, such a good series so far. I'm really, really enjoying it. So the first book, I don't remember what I rated it. I think maybe it was like 4 stars, because there were some world building things that I was a little confused about. It felt like a lot of things were just kind of happening to Valerie and then she reacts to them, and that was kind of how the plot was moving forward. But in the second book, I felt like it was much more like the plot was really being pushed forward because Valerie's making decisions. She's taking action. She's like reacting to something and then making a decision, and that's what pushes the plot forward. So it's less things happening to her that seem kind of like random, and it's more like her doing things, making decisions, and that's what is pushing the plot forward. So kind of the things that, and then yeah, like the world building, you're getting to know more about the world. So the questions that I kind of was like confused about in book 1 have been answered slightly more in book 2, so I'm realizing like, okay, like we're gonna get more of the world building as we go, which is fine. So the things that I kind of had an issue with in book 1 have been taken care of in book 2, so I gave it 5 stars. And I want to say I was so immersed into this book while I was reading it that I don't even think I took notes. I don't think I took a single note. I have my notebook here, and I usually, as I'm reading, I'll kind of note down things that I'm liking or things that I'm not liking about a book so I can like remember later on when I'm rating it, like, you know. But I was just having such a good time reading Wicked Souls that I just didn't even stop to ever take any notes. And I feel like that in and of itself deserves kind of a 5 star, because it's like I was just so thoroughly enjoying my time reading it that I was like, I don't want to stop to write anything down. I'm in this book. So sorry about my stomach. It's growling. I don't know if the camera's picking that up or not. Anyways, it was just, yeah, it was such a good book. I was so immersed into it. I'm so involved in like, I'm so like invested in the characters and the plot. Like, yeah. Also, again, I think I said this in whenever I was last talking about the series, but Katie Wismer is queen of dialogue. She does banter really well, but not just between Valerie and the love interest, but also between Valerie and her friends. Like, I just love the way that she writes the dialogue. The way that she's done the characterization for these characters, like, I really, really enjoy it. So I also think in the first book, the love interest like character, he was a little like, I don't know, a little flat, but you're not also supposed to know that much about him, so it kind of made sense. And in the second book, you're getting to know a lot more about him. He's becoming, he's showing more personality. So yeah, just all of the things that I was kind of unsure of in book 1 have like been taken care of in book 2. It does end on kind of a big like plot reveal cliffhanger type thing that I did see coming, but it's one of those ones where you're like satisfied that you guessed it right, and I think that there's probably a lot of people that wouldn't see it coming and then will be satisfied when they get to the end and they're like, oh my gosh. I thoroughly enjoyed this book, 5 stars, highly recommend this series. I will be reading, I think the third book is Bloodless Ties, I'm pretty sure is the title. I'm going to be reading that this month, June. And I think I will probably also read the 4th book in June as well. I think I'm just going to go ahead and like finish out the series. Things took a little bit of a turn, right? So we went from Wicked Souls, which was 5 stars, to this next book, which I gave 1 star. And it's The Duke and I by Julia Quinn. I was obviously in a Bridgerton mood. I decided I wanted to try to read The Duke and I, which is the one that corresponds to season 1 of Bridgerton on Netflix. I am in awe of, so the creators, the writers of the Netflix show, I am in awe that they were able to make what they made with the source material that they had. Because I'm so sorry if I'm coming off as harsh. I don't mean to be super harsh, but this book, I disliked pretty much everything about it. I did not like the writing style. I thought it was not very good. You're just told a bunch of things. It's not very showing. It's not very immersive. The kind of like intricacies of the Netflix show, like where you have kind of all these other characters woven throughout. Like you have Simon and Daphne as the focal point, but you have the other characters kind of woven in, and you're following along these kind of side things, right? Like there's none of that in the first book, so that's why I'm like so in awe of how Netflix, like how the writers were able to create what they created with such little in the way of like, because in the book like just barely anything happens. There's not really much of a plot. It's insta love, which I hate. I didn't like the writing, and the reason, normally I would have just given this book a 2-star rating. I usually don't go to a 1-star rating unless I think a book is problematic, and this book is that. I don't understand why, if I'm gonna read a romance book, the male love interest, he has to respect women, or what is the point of me reading? Like, why am I reading this book, right? Like, Simon in this book has zero respect for women. The way that he talks about how he would treat Daphne if she was not his friend's sister is questionable at the very least, but just giving off very icky vibes. And then there's the whole thing, I don't want to spoil anything if you've never read the book and you've never watched the Bridgerton show, the Netflix show. If you have seen season 1 of Bridgerton on Netflix, there's a scene in that a lot of people were kind of like, oh my gosh, that's consent in that scene was not there, questionable. It's so much worse in the book. It is so much worse in the book. I feel like in the show you can kind of like put yourself in her shoes and understand why she did what she did. In the book, it is, she knows exactly what she's doing and she's purposefully doing that. That's all I will say, but both sides, Daphne and Simon in the book, do not understand consent at all. And I'm just sitting there like, why would anybody, like, this is just not okay. Like, it's not okay because it's not talked about in a way where it's like the author's trying to explore and educate about what consent means. Like, she's romanticizing the fact that these two characters don't understand consent, neither of them. And again, insta love, and then like neither of the characters are likable. Like, it was just not, I had to force myself to finish it. It was not an enjoyable read. I'm thankful the book was so short. But I will never pick up another Bridgerton book. It's not happening. Because I've heard similar things about the rest of the books as well. So I think just overall, like, not interested. And if anyone's kind of come at me with that whole like, well, it's like historically accurate. No, it's fucking not. And historical romances don't need to be accurate in that way. They don't need to be accurate in that way because it's fiction. It's fiction. I don't care if it's a historical romance. The man, the main male character, the love interest, he better respect women. I don't care if it's not historically accurate, but he better. Otherwise, again, why am I reading that? I don't want to read that. I just don't, okay? Because even in dark romance books where the love interest is doing questionable shit, he still is like doing it for her. That makes sense, right? Like, it is morally gray, but he's doing it out of love. Maybe a little bit of obsession, right? But it's like a dark romance, like a different thing, and you know going in that you're not romanticizing it the way that it's romanticized in a book like this. So it's just like, so that was 1 star for me. If you have read these books, let me know your thoughts on them. I'm very curious. And I'm in such awe that the Netflix writers were able to like create what they did based off this book, because the book was so bad, in my opinion. So the next book that I read was also a 1 star, and this was one audiobook that I listened to this month, and it is The Night Swim by Megan Golden. And again, I don't give out 1 stars unless I feel like the book is a bit problematic. And so the premise of this book is that the main character is the host of a true crime podcast. She's in her 3rd season, and she's decided for this season she's going to follow a live rape trial. So she travels to this small town to cover the proceedings. When she gets there, she starts getting basically stalked by this woman who is trying to get her to investigate a cold case. a murder that happened 25 years ago that was ruled as a suicide. Of course, these two cases, the rape case and the cold case, are connected. And that's kind of the premise of the book, is like, how are they connected and who murdered the girl 25 years ago and how is that connected to this rape trial that's ongoing. The premise sounded great. The whole thing with like the true crime podcast, like there's podcast segments in the book. I'm gonna start with saying, and this isn't why I rated it a 1 star, this would be why I would rate it like a 2 stars, that I didn't think the writing was very good. It's very expository. You're just basically being told a bunch of things, like just listed out, and like the amount of detail that I got about things that were just totally unimportant, like what the character's eating for breakfast, and there's a side character who's been in a motorcycle accident and he's like barely in the book, and yet I know everything that's happening with him medically for some reason. Like the author goes into so much detail on so many irrelevant things that it just made it so hard to read. And even though I was listening to the audiobook, if I was reading this book, I would have DNF'd it because I would just be like, why am I reading this? But I was able to put on the audiobook while like doing chores and stuff, so it was like, wasn't pleasant to listen to, but it was like, at least there's something on in the background. Anyways, I was not a fan of the writing style. I also kind of got the impression that this author has never ever listened to a true crime podcast ever. So that's kind of weird. Like just the podcast segments were, the way that they were done was just they didn't add anything to the story, and they were not anything. Like, and obviously you can't put like a full-length podcast episode into a novel, like that would make it so long, and you know, just it would be ridiculous. But like just the content that was mentioned in the podcast segments was like just the main character, like basically just a bunch of conjecture, and like that's just not how true crime podcasts like work, I guess. Like they try to stick to facts, they try to, you know, they'll add in their own opinions here and there, but like, I don't know, it just felt like she'd never actually listened to one before. So the part that made me go down to a 1 star is that it really felt like this author was trying to make the argument that because a rape victim has already gone through so much trauma, and then like having to, you know, testify against, you know, with their rapist in court, right? Like that's a whole nother level of trauma. So like, because that is true, which it is, it's a traumatic thing, both for it to have happened in the first place and then to have to relive it. I don't think anyone's arguing against that. At least no one reading this book is going to be arguing that that's not the case. But the author was trying to make this argument that because like the rape trial in and of itself is its own trauma, that we should get rid of the notion of innocent until proven guilty, like the foundation of our legal system, and arguably the one good thing about our legal system. She's like arguing that we do away with it. And I just felt like that was such a weird direction to take this book in, and it really made the book feel, first of all, it didn't feel like a mystery or a thriller. It felt like a social commentary piece, and I did not sign up to read that. I don't like reading that type of stuff, and it was just like, it didn't add anything to the conversation. In fact, I felt like it took away from the conversation, because anyone that did come to this book with an open mind would, I feel like, immediately be turned off by the outrageous idea that we just like assume people are guilty and have them prove that they're innocent, right? Which is like, our legal system has a lot of issues, I'm not denying that, but that is one good thing, is that we do have to like prove that someone's guilty before we put them in jail. Does that, you know, is it foolproof? No, but it's better than the alternative. And the idea that like this would somehow help women, no. If you take away the idea of innocent until proven guilty, it's going to affect the people in the society that are already facing oppression, women and minorities, right? We live in a patriarchal society. Anyone who is not a white man, right, is going to be more so affected by something like that, some change like that in our legal system. It would put more women and minorities in jail than it would a white man, right? So like, it's this idea that that would somehow help society is just so outlandish to me, and I feel like there's so many other things that we could change about the legal system to fix a lot of these problems that we see. First of all would be changing, like, some of these states have a not great definition of legally what it means to be raped, and so therefore they won't charge someone with rape, even though in fact what we socially understand rape to be, like, they would be found guilty of, but like legally, like the legal definition, it doesn't match our social definition. That could be something that could change. Minimum sentencing could be something that could be changed. The proceedings and how the trial is actually handled, like there could be some changes made there maybe to help the victim feel more supported, right? Like there's a lot of things that this book could have explored and chose not to, and said was like, let's just get rid of the one good thing about our legal system. I've had some space from this book, like I've had some distance, but when I was first reading it, I was up in arms, like I was livid. I was like, what are you saying? Like this is crazy. And I just feel like it just takes away from the conversation, because it's so dumb. It's just such a stupid, in my opinion, idea. And I don't understand why you would choose to make that argument in this book. And if that was not the author's intention, then I'm not sure why it was written the way that it was. Those are the main issues I had with this book, but I could make a whole super long ass video about everything that I hated about this book, but I won't do that to you. But I would not recommend it. If you're looking for a mystery or thriller, this is not that. Like, yes, it has a mystery to it, but it's super obvious who the murderer is. It's super obvious how the cases are connected, so it wasn't really like intriguing in that way. And then like I wouldn't call it a thriller either, and yeah, it was like a social commentary piece that I just did not agree with and felt was actually kind of harmful. And also there was just gratuitous depictions of rape that it wasn't necessary. They weren't necessary. They didn't add anything to the story. All the characters are completely flat, no dimension whatsoever. Just all around, I thought a really poorly written book, really poorly researched argument. Just all around was not happy with that book. Almost DNF'd it several times, but like forced myself to keep going with the audiobook, and yeah, just big no for me. I would not recommend it. Okay, moving on. So things kind of start to take a little bit of a more positive turn from here. The next book that I read was Their Vicious Darling by Nikki St. Croix. This is the third book in the Vicious Lost Boys series, which is a Peter Pan reimagining, but like make it dark romance. It's a reverse harem as well. And I also read The Fae Princes, which is the fourth book in the series. And I gave both of them 4 stars. I'll kind of collectively talk about the series since I finished it. I feel like if you want a very quick dark romance read and you like reverse harem, this is definitely for you then. It's pretty much mostly smut, to be completely honest. There's a little bit of plot to it, but mostly smut. But I did enjoy the characters. I thought like the level of world building for what the books are trying to be was pretty well done, in my opinion. I think the only kind of, it's not even a critique, I would have loved if this had been like more of a fantasy romance type thing, because the world building, like the magic, all of it was very intriguing, and I just wanted more of it, to be completely honest. So I really like the writing style as well. It's not overdone. It's very like, it's a lot of dialogue, which I like, and then, you know, shorter sentences, like not getting a ton of internal monologue. Like, it's just a writing style I really enjoy. Very quick reads. I would definitely recommend it if it's your vibe. If you're not really into dark romance, I wouldn't recommend it, and if you don't like reverse harems, I wouldn't recommend it. Although I'm not really a reverse harem girly, but I liked this one, and I think the reason that this one I liked is because the love interests are all different. Like the they're not just like the same character with like different names. Like there's a different dynamic between each of them and the main character. They have like an interesting dynamic between all of the guys. Like, yeah, so I really overall I enjoyed this, and I think that if you, yeah, if, like a dark romance Peter Pan reimagining sounds intriguing, I would definitely give it a try. I think you'll have a good time with it. Okay, so the next book I actually have a physical copy of. This is Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahurin. This book is basically follows our main character Lou, who is a witch. Witches are kind of outlawed in this land that this is set in, which is like a made-up world with magic, but it's also France, which we'll come back to. But it follows Lou and then her love interest Reed, who is a witch hunter, of course. And they are basically, it's like forced proximity. They're basically, something happens and they're kind of forced to get married. The French aspect of this kind of threw me off. It just felt a little unnecessary, because like the characters will be speaking in English and then all of a sudden they'll just throw in a French word for some reason, and I wasn't really quite sure why, like why it needed to be France. Like, it was just a bit weird, but I suppose if you speak French and English you might find it kind of fun. For me it was just one of those things where every time I would get to a French word my brain would like be like, wait, and I would kind of get taken out of the book. So if I was watching like a TV show adaptation or a movie with that same thing going on where characters are speaking in both like English and French, it would have sounded nice, right? I would have liked it. But when I'm reading, and because I have to pause and kind of try to like figure out like how to pronounce the word, it like throws me out of the book a little bit. So I personally didn't really like that aspect, but I could see why people would enjoy it. And it's something a little bit different, I suppose, as well. So I gave this book 3 stars. It personally just didn't quite do it for me. I didn't really like either of the character. Like, I wasn't really a big fan of Lou. I wasn't really a big fan of Reed, her love interest. Like, Reed was super flat. Like he had no personality, I felt like. And Lou started off, I started enjoying her character, but then she kind of quickly like morphed into this, I don't know, sort of like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like she comes across as kind of like, I don't know, cool and collected and like independent in the beginning, and then she kind of turns into this like very like whiny, independent, like, I don't know, kind of annoying character. And I don't know, I wasn't like, I was expecting there to be really good banter between them because like Lou is a bit more experienced, if you know what I mean, and the love interest is not, and he's very like pious, and he's basically like a witch hunter priest type thing, so you know, you would assume like he's gonna be very uncomfortable around her, and he is, but like the banter didn't, like, I wasn't a super big fan of it. And the way that Lou kind of like teases him and things like that, I wasn't a huge fan of their dynamic, I guess. So it wasn't like rooting against them, like against their romance, but I wasn't really super invested in it either. And then as far as like the plot goes, I wasn't super invested. I just didn't really care. I found myself getting really bored at the end of the book. And I don't know, there was just nothing plot-wise that was really intriguing to me, or that like, I don't know, I was not invested, I was not connected to the book. For that reason, I will not be continuing with this series. I don't doubt that it probably has some good times in the second and third books, but I just didn't really feel like it was for me. It just wasn't my vibe, and didn't have the elements that I'm looking for in a romantasy. So I can definitely see, that's why I gave it 3 stars. Like, I can see why people really liked it, and the writing style, like in and of itself, was perfectly fine. Like, it was good writing, it's just like wasn't for me, I guess. So this is a book I will be unhauling, and I'm not going to continue with this series, but I can see why people like it. And then moving on to the last book, and then after this one I'll talk about the book I DNF'd real briefly, but the last book that I finished is A Dawn of Onyx by Kate Golden. This is the first book in the Scarred Stones, Sacred Stones. I think this is a trilogy. I know that the second book is out. I don't know about the third book. Anyways, this follows Arwen, who I forgot her name until I literally just looked at the back of the book. It follows Arwen, who is basically at the beginning of the book, she is taken prisoner by the soldiers from the Onyx Kingdom, and she has been taught to believe that the king of this kingdom is like very, very cruel, that the whole kingdom is like bad, they're evil, they're waging war on her kingdom for no reason other than greed and just wanting more land and riches for themselves. Yeah, so she's taken prisoner, and then while she's in basically like the dungeons in the Onyx Kingdom, she starts chatting with a fellow prisoner who is intriguing to her. I rated this 3 stars. I feel like it had a lot of potential. I found myself at some parts really enjoying it, and I felt at other times I was kind of cringing. There were definitely moments that I really enjoyed in this book, but there was also I felt like there's so much potential for this book. Like, it has a lot of really good potential, writing style wise, liked it, like, on a line level, didn't have any issues with the writing style. I just felt like everything felt just a little flat for me. Like I liked the characters, but I didn't love them. Like, I wasn't super invested in any of them really. So I wasn't super invested in the romance either. Like, I didn't, it was fine, but it just wasn't, I wasn't like, oh my gosh, I need to keep reading to see when they like get together, like, yeah. And then the plot felt a bit all over the place. It felt like some of the like plot twists, some of the reveals, like some of them you see coming a mile away, and others kind of come out of nowhere because there wasn't enough world building done to like, I think like the author was intending for like some of the plot reveals, like some of the twists to be like, to like punch a bit more, to like be like, whoa, like that's so cool, or like, oh, I didn't see that coming. But it's like, oh, I didn't see that coming because I literally didn't know that that was a possibility in this world, because the world building didn't set it up correctly. So like the plot twists weren't really like very, they just kind of felt like, wait, you just made that up. Like, and obviously everything in this book is made up, but like, do you know what I mean? It's like, where did that come from? Where did that plot twist come from? It's not like an aha moment where you're like, oh, that's why this thing before was mentioned, and it was like, literally, where did that come from? Like, I don't know. And yet at the same time I still saw some of them coming. I will continue with this series, but I'm not really in a hurry. If it's not finished yet, like if the third book is not out yet, I'm definitely I'm gonna wait until the third book is out. I don't know, I haven't looked. But this is one that I will keep reading it because I do feel like I see so much potential, and I don't know, I think this is her debut book, I'm not sure. So I'm kind of a little bit more lenient in terms of like, because some of the things that I felt like weren't satisfying in this book are things that it's probably because it's like shit that like new authors do a lot. I know because I do it in my own writing, and it's hard to get that level of like where you're laying all the right breadcrumbs, but like people don't realize they're breadcrumbs until the reveal, if that makes sense. Like, it's hard to do that. It's a lot of things to juggle. And so I would love to continue with this series, kind of see how the author continues to grow, because I think she's a really good writer. It's just that I think some of the stuff wasn't set up properly in the beginning of the book. So I will continue with this series. I was kind of asking myself, like, why am I going to continue with this one versus Serpent and Dove, which I think were both equally, like, the writing was equally good. I don't think, writing wise, like, I did not have any issues with like the actual writing styles. But I think this one, the romance was a little bit more viable for me. Like, the romance was a little bit more my speed, I guess, and I think I was I liked these characters a bit more. I'm a little bit more invested, so that's why I'm going to continue with this series versus Sabrina and Duff, where I'm like, I'm just not invested at all, so I'm just not going to continue with the series. But yeah, so this one I would say, like, if you're looking for your kind of average romantasy book, I think it's a quick read. I think you'll enjoy it. This does have the "who did this to you" trope, and I personally am starting to feel like I really dislike that trope now. I just feel like it's been done way too much, and this is just a side note, but I really wish authors would stop doing the like "who did this to you" trope with like the scars on the back. Like the main character has a bunch of scars on her back because of childhood trauma, and then, you know, the love interest sees that and is like, oh my god, who did this to you? Like, I'm over that specific version of that trope. And I feel like I feel like the love interest asks her like multiple times in this book. Like, she gets hurt and he's like, who did this to you? And it happens like multiple times, and I'm like, all right, let's take it easy on this trope, okay? We don't need to overdo it on that trope. Personally, it's just not one of my favorites, but if you love that trope, then you may love this book because it has a lot of that in it. All right, and then the one book that I DNF'd was Lady of Darkness by Melissa K. Rorick. I believe I might be mispronouncing her last name, apologies if I am, but yeah, I DNF'd Lady of Darkness. I just could not get into that book. I hated the main character. I thought she was awful. Like, she is mean for no reason. She's like whiny and spoiled and mean, and she has anger management problems, and the love interest was not that much better, honestly. Like, he also seems to have anger management problems, and I'm just like, what the heck is this? And also the insta love, so much insta love in that book. I was just not having it. I got like 18% of the way through, and I was just like, I can't continue with this. Like, I didn't have an issue necessarily with the writing style. I did feel like the author was trying to do too much. Like, I felt like there's way too many like different plot things trying to go on, way too many characters, and I wasn't sure like where any of it was going, because like they made zero progress in the first 18% of the way through the book. Like, nothing really happens. Like, some things happen, but I don't know. And I got to a point where I was like, I cannot handle Scarlet as a main character. I just don't like her. So my plan, because I was only gonna read Lady of Darkness, like that series, because it's connected to the Legacy series by the same author. I wanted to read that one first because it came out first. I think I'm just gonna go ahead and read the Legacy series, like read the first book, and if I don't like that one either, maybe I'm just not interested in the characters that this author creates, or, you know, maybe, I don't know. But if I like the Legacy series, maybe I'll continue with it, because again, it wasn't like a writing issue. It wasn't like I hated the writing style. It was just like, I could not stand the character. So I don't know. If you've read that book, let me know what you thought about it, but I just could not get, I couldn't get past that, my dislike for the main character. I just like, I was like, why are you so mean? Why are you being so mean? Those are all of the books that I read in May. Hopefully I gave you guys enough information, enough of a synopsis for each book that you weren't lost if you didn't know which book I was talking about. But yeah, let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought about them. Obviously try to keep the comments spoiler free if possible, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed hearing my reviews on these books. Let me know if any of these are ones that have piqued your interest now, and if you are going to read them, and yeah, if you have any book recommendations for me based off of any of these books, or just if you read a book recently that you loved and you want to tell me about it, definitely let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you are currently reading, what you've been loving. If you have a book that you really hated that you want to rant about in the comments, you can do that too. I'm open for it. I feel like sometimes you just have to get it off your chest how much you didn't like a book, you know what I mean? If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more content from me, make sure you hit that subscribe button before you go. But yeah, I will be back with a new video soon, and until then, I hope you have lots of fun reading time, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!
Alright, this is a song that I wrote about falling too fast, but I wouldn't know anything about that.
I don't wanna lose my grounding, so you catch me not responding, and I press my lips together so you don't find any answers.